Right, so part 2 of episode 7 of the Amazing Digital Circus will release next week, and... wait, what? Yeah, that's right. This episode of the series wasn't actually supposed to be its own episode at all, but rather a continuation from the last one that picks up exactly where we left off. The only reason this was split is because it's probably going to be another 20 or so minutes of content, and a 1 hour penultimate episode followed by a shorter finale is not what we want to see. Isn't that right, guys? Regardless, because it's within 2 weeks of the release date, we have almost all of the teaser material that we can get for this episode, so it's time to renew the tradition of overanalyzing every single frame to see if we can figure out what's going to happen. We'll take a look at what goes on after this scene, what this portal leads to, and most importantly, the impact that Ribbit is going to have on the end of this series. Let's get into it. First up, we should organise all of these frames into their respective groups. There are several shots from the same scenes as seen by the backgrounds and the characters present that we can link together. In the couch area, we have these ones are all from them falling, these are in Kane's office, these ones are in a black void, these are some from the macroverse, some from an adventure with Jax, and then plenty from the stage, but I'm not entirely sure these are all from the same scene, and we'll examine that later. There's also a few shots that can't be pinned to a specific spot just because they're all so close up. Each one of these groups shares a common background, or at the very least similar colours, so we can assume that each is an important scene from the episode that evokes these strong emotions. We are also definitely missing lots of scenes here that would give stuff away, but there is enough to get a start, an end, and a guess at the middle. The start for me is the most obvious part of this episode, and it will be the falling scene. Looking closely behind the characters, there's no portal here, meaning they must have come from another location inside the grounds, and not from a separate adventure world. This would only make sense if they've just been shoved out of Kane's office and back into the tent, because he obviously doesn't want the characters there watching him while he comes up with all of his great adventures. The cast has likely also just had a screaming match with him once the shock of the fact that everything was fake wears off. Kane's lines from the trailer also seem to reinforce this.
Surely they don't want to actually leave me.
The only reason he would be questioning if the characters actually wanted to leave him behind now after being so sure that they wouldn't last episode is if someone crashed out and told him that they wanted to leave. My money's on Zubul, who is coincidentally in the foreground of the next shot in this scene. Also thinking about this logically, in order to get up into Kane's office in the first place, Abel had to heave the characters up into this hot air balloon, so them appearing higher up once they re-enter makes sense. This next shot has more to offer us as well, with the characters looking up at what is presumably a very pissed off Kane, that opens up a portal behind them which they are all sucked through while he contemplates his purpose and starts to have a mental breakdown, which leads him to teleporting back into his office to try and calm everything down, looking at all of his previous adventures and the cast's reaction to them to try and find a way to fix everything. Back with the cast, and they appear to have been transported into various different moments within the history of the circus, all centering around the show stage. Since this is a direct lead on from the last episode, the real-life visions Jax had of driving his car are fresh in his mind, and Kane uses them to project his memory of arriving in the circus with this car crash. Nobody else in the circus has ever had any relation to cars, while Jax has a history with them going as far back as episode 2, and we see what is potentially his arm for a few frames in the trailer glitching out and stretching. Kinga also appears to have a flashback to his entrance in the circus, but unlike Jax, his is at the very start of the game running. We get this wide-angle shot of a completely empty section of the tent with only this support pillar here on the checkered floor. There is no location that is anywhere near that barren currently, so this must be before Kane filled it with stuff. We later get a few shots of Kinga up on the show stage with a concerned look on his face, and the thing that pretty much everyone has already pointed out appears. Queenie's robes appear on the left, and in keeping with the themes of chess, she is substantially bigger than Kinga is. The shot also shows him with an inquisitive look on his face. Not one of the goofy, I've completely lost track of the conversation looks, like a proper inquisitive look, as though he's actively questioning something. With this being in broad daylight, we can assume that Kinga here will have his brain function back. The idea that Kane has no control over the characters' minds has been proven false by episode 5, so giving Kinga his sanity back is not a very far stretch. There are also several shots of Pomni here that don't seem to link together in any particular way, and are in locations that we haven't seen before, but we can assume that there must be some sort of flashback here given the other two. And while none of their own experiences are shown here, we can assume that if these three are having flashbacks to their starts in the circus, the rest of the cast is too, with Gangle, Zubul, and Ragatha having their own recollections. It's unlikely we'll see too much of that though, as the landscape of the circus is at a point where these three having entered would have been pretty similar to what it is now, especially in the case of Gangle and Zubul, where their only differences would have been the inclusion of Kaufmo and Ribbit. Okay, yes, we will get to Ribbit in a second. I know that's the title of the video, that's what you want to see, just give me a moment. I need to disprove something that I've been seeing all over my shorts feed recently, this render. It has absolutely no meaning. Everyone and their grandma is going on about how Pomni's blush has disappeared, and oh, what does that mean? It's a rendering error. The blush object has slipped behind the rest of her face. It happened here and here. It has no actual meaning. Now, back to Ribbit. Ribbit is going to be involved in the second and third memory sequences that Jax is going to be sucked into. Our first clue that this is happening is ironically in the last episode, which is actually just foreshadowing for the latter half of it because these were split. There are two instances of it here. The first is this Polaroid of Jax, Ribbit and Kaufmo drinking hot chocolate, presumably at the end of an adventure, and the second is this memory snow globe in Kane's office. From inside the snow globe, we can hear an argument developing between Jax and Ribbit. This voice is confirmed to be her by the end credits of the episode, a reveal that probably wasn't supposed to happen at that point when the two episodes were to remain fused. The conversation in the snow globe is an argument between Ribbit and Jax about the latter's relationship with Kaufmo. Ribbit is convinced that Jax and Kaufmo were close friends, which Jax is repeatedly trying to deny. There's also some subtle messaging here with the snow globe answering Pomni's question, but that's not really that important. There are two shots of Jax reliving the hot chocolate memory in the trailer. One where he's holding the actual hot chocolate, and another one where it's just his hands. The coloration of the floor in both shots is the same, so we can assume it's the same scene. The hot chocolate shot also has a shadow in the top left hand corner that when flipped around lines up perfectly with the artwork of Ribbit's head that we've seen before, confirming she is in this scene. But this is a happy memory, as evidenced by the photo, so we have to jump at least one more time to get to the snowy mountains where they have this argument. There's no way Goose would have included this fragment of conversation for Jax to recall and then not allow us to see the whole thing. But that brings up an important question. Why is Jax in particular bouncing around so much when none of the other characters have any evidence to suggest that they're doing the same? Well, it may be because my original assessment of what's going on here wasn't quite right, and the flashbacks aren't following each character's entrance to the circus. That is, of course, a possibility, which is why I've left it in, but the most likely scenario, for me at least, is these memories are following distinct characters lost in the circus. The trailer only really shows us evidence of Jax, Kinga, and Pomni moving around in the episode, and the only common factor between these three is a deep connection to a character in the circus that's no longer here. Kinga has his wife, Jax has Ribbit, and Pomni has Gummy Goo. None of the other cast members have been shown to have this sort of connection, so their flashbacks aren't as important to the story. Finally, we get to the end of the episode, which begins with the cast returning from their previous adventures, either having found closure or being close to abstraction. The couch area has repeatedly been used for the chilling out spot after an adventure takes place, so it makes sense that this would be near the end of the episode. It's not the end of the events for the day, however, as Kane is in his office losing the absolute plot. Bubble and his own feelings of inadequacy have been tormenting our lovable AI since he sent the characters out of his office, and a similar situation to what we saw with the Zooble therapy session is occurring. With the suggestion that he is bad at the only thing he's good at, Kane's AI starts to short circuit. He feels immense pain in the fact that the humans don't want to stay with him, and Bubble is absolutely not helping. We won't get into the Bubble Boy virus in this video because it requires a whole other explanation, but in essence he is antagonizing Kane and trying to make him lose the plot. In this task, he is very successful. Just when everything starts to calm down and the cast begin to share what happened to them, the walls of the circus start glitching out. The lights go down and everything begins to warp and shift unnaturally. Kane's AI, and thus the circus, is falling apart. And that is where the episode will end on a cliffhanger to the finale. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.